What it do, FNAF crew? Welcome back to another FNAF stream. And also, welcome to the first stream of 2026. And honestly, could you expect anything more? Are you even surprised that for our first stream of the new year, it's going to be FNAF related? Let's be honest, this should not come as a surprise. So, get into another FNAF theory for today and everything. It's Friday and everything, so as you all know, that Friday means Friday Fazbear from Friday Fest, whatever else the alliteration is. I can't remember. I change it every single week and everything. But getting back to another FNAF video, so let's hop into it. And I'm very curious what this video entails because it's about sister location, which is very interesting. Because, as I've said before, Sister Location is a very, very important game. Because, similar to Dragon Ball, I'm going to use an anime reference because I feel like Dragon Ball is a lot easier of a comparison similarity than someone like FNAF that is not popular, so to speak, compared to Dragon Ball especially. How Dragon Ball has, arcs and sagas and everything. The first saga is, the purple guy, phone tapes, FNAF 1 to FNAF 4, which is all about, kids being lured to a back room and killed by an employee wearing a yellow rabbit suit, and then they're killed, bodies are stuffed in the suits and everything, they go on to be possessed and everything, and then you, the player, are Michael Afton, and you are the night security guard, and you're going location to undo the sins of the father. Sister Location goes way more sci-fi, futuristic, where you have sound illusion discs, you have animatronics are sentient, and they have personalities, you have scoopers, you have remnant, and then you get into the next arc, which is like the pizzeria, Pizza Plet, Security Breach, AR, VR world. And that's like Security Breach, VR, Help 1 and 1 and 2. That's when you get into Glitch Trap. That's when we get into the Mimic. That's when we get into Ruin as well, of how the VR and AR networks are breaking the real world as we know and everything, of how the VR world is causing people's minds to be manipulated, where you are having to question what you see in the real world, and that in turn causes people's bodies to be possessed by animatronics. You have robot people, robot kids, and that's the era that we currently reside in, currently in FNAF. And I would imagine maybe within the next 2-3 years, we're going to close that chapter, close that saga of the body transformation, robot people, robot kids, VR, ARs, mimics, into something else. So we'll see what that turns into. But another reason why I feel like Sister Kids to be very, very important is going back to my review on the FNAF 2 movie, how I said there was a ton of Sister Location teases in the movie and everything. I feel like ever since the FNAF 2 movie, I personally am looking at the game Sister Location a lot differently now. And it's crazy. Alright, let's get into it. Enough delaying.
What? Oh my god. AR plush baby, what's she doing here? I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry. In the last 4 years worth of FNAF games, there's been some subtle or even blatant callback to Sister Location. This is one of the biggest mysteries of modern FNAF because it feels like Scott and Steelwool are desperately trying to tell us something. And it wasn't until now that I think I've figured it out. This year, Sister Location turned 9 years old.
My god. 9 years old? Sheesh. 9 years old, I feel old. Oh my god. No. Sister Location's a decade old, pretty much. Reminder, this is like how long I've been attached to the fan base and everything. FNAF 1, 2, 3, 4 comes out. And then there was like a few month, like maybe like 5-6 month gap between FNAF 4 coming out and Sister Location coming out. And at the time, that was a big deal because FNAF 1, FNAF 2, FNAF 3, FNAF 4, they were coming out like, you know, honestly like a factory line where we play FNAF 1, it's a big hit on the internet, it explodes in popularity, and then within like a week, we get a trailer, a teaser for FNAF 2, and then after like a week that we see the FNAF 2 teaser, the game comes out, and then after FNAF 2 comes out, we'll get a tease for FNAF 3, and then there'll be like, 10 days until FNAF 3 comes out, and then 9 days until FNAF 3 comes out. And on the 8th day, which you would think would be the 8th day on the countdown, Scott would just randomly release it saying, we're waiting long, if I'll just release FNAF 3 8 days early. So we quite literally, I mean this no exaggeration, we were literally getting a new FNAF game, FNAF 1, 2, 3, 4. We were getting them pretty much every like month or two. A month or two goes by, you would expect a new FNAF game. So having FNAF 4 come out and it be like 5, 6, 7 months afterwards, it was a big deal. But guess what? That did not mean in that 5, 6 month span, we were completely gone from FNAF content, because in that time frame between FNAF 4 and Sister Location is when we got the introduction of, say it with me, the books. The original trilogy of books came out in that time frame. And then look what that spawned as far as books at this point. It feels like at this point, you can't have a FNAF theory. You can't talk about FNAF. You can't play the newest game if you do not have knowledge of the books. Hell, speaking of the books and everything, this went over my mind and I didn't mention it in my FNAF 2 review, but spoilers, I guess. I'm gonna get this, well, I guess it's fine, but I guess spoilers anyway. If you haven't seen the FNAF 2 movie, the FNAF 2 movie ends with the OG animatronics from the first movie show up and then rip apart the toy animatronics. That's a big deal because in the Twisted Ones, the second book in the original trilogy that I'm talking about, between FNAF 4 and Sister Location, that's how the second book ends. Is FNAF animatronics, one group of them, shows up and then rips apart and kills another group of FNAF animatronics. I completely missed it in my review and everything, but once I saw them, like, damn, completely missed that. But man, Sister Location, 9 years ago. My God, I've been doing this a long time.
And in those 9 years, we've figured out a lot of stuff surrounding the game, but nothing compares to what I'm going to talk about today. There's details and clues that have been right in front of our faces that were completely overlooked for years. Until now. Let's get started. One thing that's always been weird to me about Sister Location is how sci-fi Scott suddenly took the series. Maybe you'll relate to this, but I've always found it weird how Afton was able to build a giant underground bunker directly beneath his house. How much did this cost? Where did he get the money to build this? And even if he did have the money, logistically, how would someone build something like this?
I brought this up in the intro of how Sister Location, it started this new saga, this new angle of the FNAF series, where it went more sci-fi, scoopers, remnants, animatronics having, personalities, and they're able to think and act for themselves and everything. So I brought that up in the intro.
Well, the answer is he didn't build it. It's been widely believed for a while now that William Afton was the businessman of Fazbear Entertainment, who handled all of the money, while his partner Henry was the creative genius, who designed and built the animatronics. This was backed up by the newest game, Secret of the Mimic, where we learned that while Henry was working with Edwin on the animatronics,
I got the change order from Hen last night. It would be so much easier to keep using the spring locks.
Afton was the one working on the business side of things. Throughout the game, we see Afton attempt to steal all of Edwin's employees and bankrupt his entire company. Afton eventually gets what he wants and owns all of Edwin's, quote, software development and the entire MCM catalog. But in this message, we learn that Afton doesn't just take Edwin's company, he takes all of Edwin's land. Quote, although we now
Okay, before I get into this, I just want to pull something for a second. So if what you're saying is that William Afton did not invent any animatronics, which, by the way, that's not new and everything. That's something that was covered in the Silver Eyes, the first book in the entire series. The first time that William Afton was revealed, and that was how the identity was revealed. That William Afton's name was revealed. He was the purple guy, but he was the business person. He was the one that, did, the paperwork, taxes, stuff like that. Henry was the creative. Henry was the genius animatronic inventor. And that's why, as we got, further in the games and everything, and we got into, FNAF 6 with the micro melodies, how the micro melodies were literally made. Someone like Ned Bear was made to avoid copyright. We believe that William Afton and Henry had separate businesses, separate companies. One of them went bankrupt, and the other one was successful enough and bought them out for their companies to merge and to become one company, Fazbear Entertainment. And that's how stuff like, obviously, Secret of the Mimic calls everything in question. But at the time, we believed at one point that Chica was the Miracle Melody part of, and Henry was the one who made the Miracle Melodies, and Chica was part of that. But the Miracle Melodies, the business was not successful. It closed down everything. So William Afton bought the business, Henry's business, and that's how Chica would later join the Fazbear gang for the foreseeable future. But they didn't start out as part of Fazbear, right? But on the flip side, you also have another interpretation where, no, William Afton was the one who had the failing business. Henry had the successful business. Henry bought William Afton to save him, to help him out, and that in turn caused William Afton to be jealous of Henry, because here is William Afton being saved by this other person, and that's how he became vengeful, and that's how he went so far over the edge to kill Henry's daughter, because he had a motive then, because he felt embarrassed, he felt spited, because he was saved by someone else. Obviously, Edwin, Secret of the Mimic, throws a trench and all that because Chica was part of MCM and it gets complicated. But I brought all that up because, first of all, that's not new information that William Afton and Henry were in business partnership together, and William Afton was the business side of things, and Henry was the person who was the genius inventor. But I want to pull something up for a second. If we go into the FNAF sister location blueprints, okay. So if we go into the FNAF location blueprints, and I hope you guys are able to see it. So yeah, this is one of the blueprints. All right. Conveniently, we pulled Funtime Freddy. I didn't mean to do that, but I'm glad to. And honestly, Funtime Freddy's the GOAT. Kellen Goff, you are the GOAT, as always. So, this is Funtime Freddy, right? As you can see. But, it's very small. But, you can very clearly see at the bottom of the blueprints, it says copyright Afton Robotics on the blueprints for the Funtime animatronics. Right. We also know that I'm trying to remember. When you boot up System Location for the first time, you hear a voice memo talking about all the things that Baby can do, of how, she can make ice cream, she can inflate balloons from her fingertips and everything. And the audio closes with the person saying, those are the design choices we are curious about, Mr. Afton. Which, very quite literally, not only that voice line, intro, when you first boot this location, but the blueprints into this location outright stating copyright Afton Robotics LLC. You don't get more explicit than that for Afton to be maybe not the inventor, but at the very minimum have some ownership affiliation to the Funtime animatronics. Right? Certainly more than Henry does. Or Edwin.
Technically own the land, we would never touch the house your parents built. This is important because this house that Edwin's parents built happens to have a bedroom that looks very similar to the FNAF 4 bedroom and a giant underground bunker directly beneath it. The house also sits on a hill, just like the Afton house. When Afton took over Edwin's land, he got access to a house on a hill with a built-in underground bunker directly beneath it. He even stole the toys right out of Edwin's son's room and gave them to his kids. Everything was stolen from Edwin. Need more proof? In Secret of the Mimic, when we first enter Edwin's underground bunker and get on the little ride, you can hear a song start playing in the background. This song is called Breathing Corridors and was created by Leon Riskin, Scott's go-to composer for all of the FNAF soundtracks. The song Breathing Corridors is actually about 3 minutes long, but since this little ride only lasts about a minute, we never actually get to hear the whole song in-game. So one day, while listening to the entire soundtrack, I noticed that Breathing Corridors is literally just a slowed down version of Venta Black from Sister Location.
Interesting. Music being part of the story. Interesting. I don't know if this is where it's going to go and everything, but my mind immediately went to, when it comes to music being part of theories and answers and figuring out what is really going on here, my mind immediately went to Doki Doki Literature Club, of how you outright use like the songs, but not only that, you use the songs, but you had to like play a song and skip to a certain time to unlock a certain folder to get more otherwise previously redacted information on Product Libitina. And it was very complex, very explicit, very complicated, and it was awesome. So I don't know if it's going to be like this. Oh, sorry, headphones got disconnected. I don't know if it's going to be like that explicit, but that's what my mind really ran to of, oh, what's another indie horror iconic series that I love and everything that made music part of the puzzle.
The songs are in the same exact key, have the same sound, and have that same 4-note motif. This was just the cherry on top of an already solid theory, but after realizing that Afton very likely stole Edwin's I
also think, before we go on everything, it doesn't surprise me at all that FNAF sister location and Secret of the Mimic are linked, because let's just think about this for a second. Sister location was built underneath the FNAF 4 house. It's very explicitly shown in Night 2 of Sister location, where you are powering up the bunker. You're having to power up observation rooms, which is very clearly the FNAF 4 bedroom, the Path to Fredbear's, and the Plush Trap hallway. You're having to reboot power to those locations. So, very clearly, the FNAF 4 and Sister Location bunker are linked, and they're built on top of each other. And that's also happened in the books, which is bizarre, but sure. Then you get to See the Mimic, where we believe the, house near the costume manor that is off on its own, near the woods and everything, is either the same house that is used in FNAF 4 in the experiment room that William Afton uses, or if it's not the exact same house, it was a mock-up inspiration that William Afton saw and then used as inspiration to do that experiment in FNAF 4. So, either it's the same house, or it was very clearly, at the very minimum, inspired by it.
Underground bunker and used it to create sister location, a lot more connections started to appear. In Secret of the Mimic, we meet Dispatch, who works for Fazbear Entertainment.
Hey buddy, this is Dispatch with Fazbear Entertainment. How are you feeling?
Dispatch is the one guiding us throughout the game, but shortly after we enter MCM, it's revealed that M1 from inside of Mixes takes over and starts mimicking Dispatch's voice.
Awesome. Glad to see you made it here without any complications whatsoever.
This is important because the Mixes machine containing M1 is located underground in Edwin's bunker. The same bunker that Afton would allegedly use to create sister location. This means that Afton seemingly would have access to an advanced AI that has the capability of sounding just like Dispatch.
Glad to see you made it here without any complications whatsoever.
Welcome to the first day of your exciting new career. I will be your personal guide to help you get started.
If you don't know already, Dispatch from Secret of the Mimic and Hand Unit from Sister Location actually share the same voice actor, Andy Field. While this isn't...
Andy Field voices a lot of characters in the series, and he is awesome. In fact, he's like the tutorial person from FNAF 6 Pizzeria Simulator, when you're in the shopping tycoon where you're buying things to your pizzeria to add and everything. He's awesome.
The first time a voice actor has played multiple roles in this franchise, this specific instance feels more intentional. I think it makes sense that when Afton took over Edwin's underground bunker, he also acquired F10N4, which is an AI that contained the voice of Dispatch. This could have been how Afton got the voice for Hand Unit, but I don't think that's all he got. I think Afton also got his hands on the Mimic program. Let me explain. In Security Breach, it's been basically confirmed that all of the Glamrock animatronics are using the Mimic program. This is heavily talked about in the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, but there's also proof for this in Security Breach itself. There is a whole section of the game where you enter an endoskeleton daycare. In this area, there are certain behaviors depicted on the doors. Good behavior gets a check mark, while bad behavior gets an X. This is where we're training the endoskeletons how to behave properly by showing them which behavior to mimic and which to not. It's an endo daycare because these endos are literally starting from scratch as if they're children and are being raised to be whatever character Fazbear wants them to be. This was confirmed in Help Wanted 2, where we got a whole minigame in the Endo Daycare. In this minigame, we are once again teaching a Glamrock endoskeleton the correct behavior to mimic. But at the beginning of this minigame, we hear a line that stuck out to me for a while now.
Welcome to the Playpen. Here, young animatronic endoskeletons learn how to associate with guests. Motivation chips encourage our youth to one day develop a personality and become the next Freddy, Chica, or TBD Pizzaplex star.
Motivation chips encourage our youth to one day develop a personality. What? When in any of the modern FNAF games have we ever heard of motivation chips? The game literally
motivation chips. I mean, if we're talking about this location, motivation, my mind immediately goes to using the shock mechanism to motivate Ballora, Funtime Fotsy to get them on stage and everything. But obviously, it was all a ruse, it was all a trick and everything. You weren't listening to Andy Field, hand unit, throughout this location. You were listening to Ennard/Baby, because each night you were more and more and more trusting the voice they were hearing and everything, only for you to be trusting them enough to then for them to lead you into the scooping room for you to get scooped. Done got scooped, and then they use your body, Michael Afton's body, then go outside into the public in the real world and use your body as a skin suit.
flat out tells us that these motivation chips are how we're able to teach the animatronics to develop a personality. That sounds exactly like what the Mimic program is supposed to be doing. To me, this one line is telling us that the Mimic program is put into the Glamrock animatronics through a chip. And it's this chip that gives them the ability to be trained and taught to develop certain personalities to then become the next
Freddy, Chica, or TBD Pizzaplex star.
After discovering this, I then looked back to see if these chips have been mentioned anywhere else. After we learned from Scott that Security Breach's story was all over the place, I thought there would be no way they planned this chip thing from the beginning. Until I found this. In Security Breach, you can find a duffel bag message titled Chica Report, where it says, quote, Chica's personality chip has always been a bit quirky, but the new pizza-flavored Monty Mystery Mix slushy syrup has adverse effects on her programming. She has attacked patrons, employees, and staff for it. It is recommended that Monty Mystery Mix should be recalled before we're inundated with lawsuits. In this message, they straight up just call it a personality chip. Whether it's officially called a personality chip or a motivation chip doesn't really matter. The important thing is that all the way back in Security Breach, there was mention of a singular chip that helps give each animatronic their personality. But that's not all.
But we also knew that quite literally in the Pizzaplex, they would take the the endos from the daycare section and then put a shell casing of one of the Funtime animatronics on, and then they would go on stage and everything. Like when Glamrock Freddy is, captured and in that bunker room, where you do like the, testing, experimentation, where you do like the power upgrades, the Rotzi eye upgrades, the Chica voice upgrade, the Monty Claw upgrades, where you have to do the Simon minigame. He's in the room with Vanessa, and Vanessa just outright calls out that, if, she finds out that Freddy has been helping Gregory, this entire time trying to run around the Pizzaplex and everything, then they'll just rip Freddy apart and put his Freddy casing on a new endo, and that will be the new Freddy. Right. All the animatronics are tied to the Mimic VR, AR, glitch trap network, and if they malfunction, they don't work, or there's something wrong, they'll just simply decommission them, scoop them out, destroy them, what have you, and they'll just put the shell case on new endo and then just move on like nothing happened. Twitch told me that this is my 5th stream in a row you've had that I've turned into. Huh, that's interesting. Nice.
In the modern FNAF games, the Mimic has repeatedly taken the form of Helpy. In Security Breach Ruin, the Mimic speaks to Cassie through Helpy, and successfully gets her to set it free by the end of the game. In Help Wanted 2, you can see Helpy on the screen in the main hub area, and throughout the game, he's giving us hints and encouraging us to progress. The thing is, progressing and beating the game normally gives you the bad ending, where Glitchtrap, aka the Mimic virus, wins. Helpy was purposely guiding us in the wrong direction, just like in Ruin. If you get the bad ending and come back to the main hub, Helpy is now sitting on a beach on vacation because his job is done. The Mimic virus won. As you probably know, you can get the good ending by going through Princess Quest and killing Glitchtrap once and for all. But if you try going back to the main hub after Glitchtrap is dead, Helpy isn't on vacation this time, he isn't even there anymore. That's because Helpy was once again tied to the Mimic virus. Now that Glitchtrap was gone, so was Helpy. So why does this matter? Well, this all actually ties into the first.
We also knew this, and I definitely called this out in previous theories. There's 2 versions of Helpy. It's very bizarre and doesn't make it any less complicated than FNAF already is, no. But yes, there's 2 versions of Helpy. There's Helpy, H-E-L-P-Y, and then H-E-L-P-I. Yep, Helpy. You say it the same way, 2 different spellings, and they are completely different. Because once again, as if FNAF wasn't already complicated enough to talk about. So, from what I remember, Helpy with the Y is the Helpy character you see in Ultimate Custom Night. Help with the Y is the character you see in the Tycoon shopping simulator part of Pizzeria Simulator in FNAF 6, right? That's that Helpy. Helpy with an I is the one who's tied to the Mimic Glitchtrap software, the one who installs the occipital nerve chip into Cassie's eye at the beginning of Ruin and encourages you to constantly have the Vanny mask on. The one we see on the screen of FNAF VR Help 1 and 2, but then disappears once you deal with the virus. That's Helpy with an I.
Aid minigame, where we get to see Helpy in person. In a game where they solidify that the Mimic program represents itself as Helpy, while also reintroducing us to the idea of motivation or personality chips that seemingly house the Mimic program, I find it funny that if you open up Helpy's head in the first Aid minigame, you can find a chip lodged in his brain. The fact that the chip is lodged in Helpy's brain makes me almost certain that this is our first look at the personality chip we've been hearing about for nearly 4 years now. But if you look closely at the chip, you might notice that we've actually seen this chip before. On night 5 of Sister Location, after punching the correct code into the keypad, a hatch opens on Baby's arm, revealing a little green chip. This chip looks exactly like the chip we find in Helpy's head. The same chip containing the Mimic program that might be being used in the Glamrocks can also be found in Baby. Granted, the chip we find in Helpy's head is a lot bigger than the one we find in Sister Location. But to me, it is painfully obvious that they designed these chips to look similar. I just think that the one in Helpy's head is a newer version of the chip that's being mass-produced for the Glamrocks. These 2 chips might be the same chip, but just made decades apart from each other. Like we established earlier, Afton is in charge of the business side of things at Fazbear Entertainment. Afton is, at least we think, not a genius engineer like Henry. So if this is actually true, and Afton really did steal the Mimic program from Edwin, that would explain how he was able to create such advanced animatronics. So much so that even the board of Fazbear Entertainment was shocked at what Afton was able to achieve.
There's no doubting what you've achieved on a technical level. These are clearly state-of-the-art of the art.
This might also explain why the Funtime animatronics are able to mimic voices, which we literally see happen in Sister Location.
You must let us inside the room.
You have to let me inside the room.
Either way, I think the modern FNAF games are clearly trying to tell us that the Mimic program is being stored in some kind of chip. So I was curious if in Secret of the Mimic I could find any proof of this being the case. We learn in the Tales books that Edwin created the Mimic program by literally just coding it. We even learn what coding language he used, a combination of Pascal and C. He then uploaded this code to the Mimic's computer. Quote, once Edwin had constructed the robot, he had built the computer for it. This he did by stealing hardware from some of his abandoned projects. So no mention of a singular Mimic chip in the books, but what we learned from Secret of the Mimic is that what happens in the books is different from what happens in the games. In the games, the Mimic program isn't necessarily tied to the Mimic endoskeleton. Edwin was putting the Mimic program into every single one of his inventions as well.
Another smart toy from Murray.
I am always watching and learning.
Our main goal in Secret of the Mimic is to retrieve the Mimic blueprints for Fazbear Entertainment. And towards the end of the game, we actually manage to reach Edwin's office and gain access to the blueprints. But right before we download them onto our data diver, we can see that Edwin called the blueprints the Mimic Blueprints, with the obvious reveal being that Mimic is actually an acronym. In true FNAF fashion, Secret of the Mimic gave us the answer to the MIX's acronym from Ruin, Mechanical X-Form Experimental Storage, but in return gave us a new mystery in the Mimic acronym. This is one of those things that feels nearly impossible to figure out, especially because no one would have ever guessed what MIX's ended up standing for.
And also in Secret of the Mimic, Helpy, well, helper, also got a meaning of an acronym.
The fact that Mimic is an acronym is interesting because throughout the entire game, Edwin always called the Mimic endoskeleton M1.
I want to introduce you to someone. This is M1.
We never once hear Edwin call it the Mimic endoskeleton. Since these blueprints aren't called the M1 blueprints, what if they're not blueprints for the physical Mimic, but for the Mimic chip? This would mean the C on the end of the acronym could stand for chip. I could also see it starting with something like Murray's and ending with integrated circuit, since integrated circuits are chips typically designed to store and run programs. So if these blueprints really are for the Mimic chip, how would Afton get his hands on them? Well, for that to happen, the escape ending of the game would have to be the canon one. In this ending, we willingly give the Mimic blueprints to M1 and go home. Afton would then gain access to M1 and the blueprints once he takes over Edwin's bunker.
That would be interesting, and that would be quite the twist. Because that will be the exact opposite of what you expect. Because ever since FNAF 3 came out, the first game that had a good and bad ending and multiple endings, ever since then, this series has conditioned us where you have to dig deep and dig even deeper than that to get to the truth, get to the lore, get to the story, get to the real answers of what's going on, right? You play through FNAF 3 normally, you get the bad ending. You don't get the good ending. You don't see the happiest day minigame. You don't lay the souls to rest unless you play through the game again and play through those minigames to one by one each night put the souls to rest. In Sister Location, you don't get into that entered room where you hear the voices of Baby, but also the girl, of how they are mimicking each other. You don't get into that entered room until you complete the Cupcake Circus Baby minigame. You don't unlock that room. In FNAF 6, you don't get that iconic Henry speech where he burns everything down once and for all, quote unquote, and then banishes his former business partner William Afton to the darkest pit of hell. You don't get that unless you salvage every single animatronic in the game as you instructed under paragraph 4 in your contract, and then play through the game normally. You also don't get the Lore Keeper ending, which is the gravesite that shows the gravesite of Charlotte, Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, and Fritz, and then also the Golden Freddy tombstone, which will later be Cassidy. You don't get that unless you play the Security Puppet, Midnight Motorist, and Fruity Maze minigames, and you beat them enough times to cause them to break. In FNAF VR Help Wanted, you don't interact with Glitch Trap. You don't get the endings where, Glitch Trap possesses your body unless you collect all 16 tapes. In Security Breach, you don't get the 3-star ending unless you play all 3 Princess Quest minigames. In Security Breach, you don't get that ending where you're burning the pizza butts down, you interact with Burn Trap, you see the Blob, unless you decommission every animatronic and put them into Freddy. Right? Like, I could go on and on and on, but you get the point. Pretty much every single game since FNAF 3, we as a player have been conditioned, the more we do, the more answers and story we get. And the only reason we talk about the story and have answers of what's going on, at least we feel like we know what's going on, is because we dive further and further and get down to every single possible ending that we can about this game and everything. So this would be the complete 180 of what you expect of, yeah, you just play through the game normally and that's a canon ending. It's not you collecting these schematics, you going against the hand unit, and you going down to the prototype room of the pizzeria where you deal with M2. You don't see the Fiona Mrs. Machine. You don't see Monty and you don't see Monty as a Springlock suit. You don't get to the bedroom. You don't do any of that. So it's just very bizarre. I'm just saying that.
This ending feels like the canon one for a few reasons. First, it is absolutely in character for Arnold to want to finish the job and get out of there as soon as possible. Second, in the parachute ending, everything including Edwin's house and the bunker get destroyed. If this happened, it would be a lot harder for Afton to move in and build sister location. There's also the fact that Afton uses the same toys as Edwin for his kids. And if the whole place burned to the ground, those toys would be destroyed and unable to be reused. There's also the
I will call a question though. The costume manor burns, but the house is up in the hill past the gate, a distance away. So I will call attention to that. So the house would still be safe even if the costume manor burns down. The house, the bedroom, like you're seeing right here, is not where the costume manor is. They're in 2 separate buildings.
The third ending where we defeat the Mimic, but that's unlikely to be canon since we know this isn't the end for the Mimic. Little did Arnold know that giving the blueprints to M1 and driving away inadvertently might have given Afton access to the Mimic program, a giant underground bunker, and a familiar AI voice to greet workers who decide to visit.
Welcome to the first day of your exciting new career.
One thing that I want to make clear is that I do not think Scott had the Mimic in mind when making Sister Location.
Agreed. Obviously. Just like, hey, Scott, when you first made the series, when you're working, minimum wage at Dollar General, you've had all these failed indie horror games. None of them were popular. None of them stick in everything. When you were developing and working on FNAF 1, your last-ditch effort, your final attempt at being a game developer, did you expect FNAF 1 that was about spooky kids being lured to a back room and stuffed into animatronic suits and never be seen again, go from that to mimics, VR, AR networks, body possessions, Bonnie Guppies, time-traveling ball pits? Did you expect all that when you made this series back in 2014? I doubt it.
If this chip in Baby's arm really does contain the Mimic virus, that would mean that Scott and Steelwool went back and made that chip more important than it originally was. This is how FNAF always has worked. Scott builds on things that he puts in his previous games. As always, for any theory, I could be completely wrong about all of this, especially the idea that the Mimic blueprints are for the Mimic chip and not the endoskeleton. I do think, though, that the personality chip is something we've completely overlooked, and I'm excited to see if that.
Alright. But good video, good theory, as always. Very interesting. And I guess as we're closing on everything, this is not the first time that John FNAF has tried to come up with answers for that green personality chip that we see in both Sister Location that we retrieved from Baby, but also in the medical minigame with Helpy. It's not the first time they brought it up and cut it to the Mimic network. So I give praise. I give a praise because I'm glad that they're also shooting for the fences again and are being consistent. So you love to see it. But anyway, let me know your thoughts. What do you think about it? Do you agree with the theory? Do you disagree with the theory? Or, better yet, do you agree with the theory and you disagree with everything that I'm saying because I'm a big dumb idiot and I totally forgot this detail? I don't know. It's possible. There's a lot of books after all. Things get lost in the cracks.